Defining Duke, an Xbox podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support the show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Salutations, everybody. It is Matty here today, and welcome to episode 49 of Defining Duke Ultimate, a Defining Duke supplement. This one has been highly requested, and as promised, we want to kick off 2022. The episode you've all been waiting for throughout the holiday season. We hope you all had enough time to play Halo Infinite's campaign. As always, I'm joined by the rested one, Lord Cognito.
Happy New Year, gents. Happy New Year. We're back.
Yeah.
Back doing what we do. Good to see Chris in the building. So this is great, man. This is the one they've been waiting for, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And Chris, how are you? How was your New Year's, your Christmas? Doing well?
Yeah, it was good. It was pretty productive. Obviously built myself a little bit of a studio space. It's coming along, coming together, slowly but surely. I'm in the final, the home stretch of it, so it's pretty much done. I can start actually filming. But not a ton of rest, I'll admit. But,
oh no,
I'm not bummed about it. I feel really productive. I feel pretty excited.
Good.
Especially about today's show.
For me, I did jack shit. So I'm feeling pretty solid right now. I'm just dragging my heels right into this one. Anyway, we're talking about Halo Infinite's campaign. Just a campaign. We're leaving the multiplayer stuff at the door. And let's get it started because I'm sure there's a lot to be said here. We had a ton of write-ins from the audience, so thank you to all of you who posted on the Patreon. And with that, let's get things started with VRG, who asked a little bit about personal rankings. Where does Halo Infinite's campaign fit into the pantheon of Halo campaigns? Personally, I put it just below Combat Evolved, Reach, and 3, with all 4 being fairly close. In my opinion, it's way better than 2 with its corridor levels and missing final mission. 4, 5, and ODST don't come close either. Although, you can't beat the rainy jazz vibes of ODST. I love Halo Wars 1 and 2, but RTS campaigns tend to be somewhat forgettable. And, of course, I want to just tag on here at the end. As always, we're going to do non-spoiler first, then spoiler stuff. We'll tell you when spoiler mode is on. But, Chris, I want to kick it right over to you as soon as possible here, because you let us know before the show. You had a lot to say about this one. And I know my review's out there. I know Cog's been open about his thoughts on Halo Infinite. I feel like you're kind of the anomaly of us three. So where does this game rank? How do you enjoy it?
Yeah, man. So I have a lot of feelings about it that kind of go in a myriad of different directions. I think a lot of it is very positive, and I'm very happy with a lot of what's there. But there are definitely certain aspects of it that, felt a little bit undercooked, a little bit. You could definitely feel the behind the scenes turmoil in certain parts of this game. As far as rankings go, I do agree that Wars 1 and 2 are kind of outliers because they're so different. Although I really like those campaigns, especially those soundtracks are really fantastic. Yeah. But I don't know, I feel like Infinite and ODST are very, very, very comparable to me. Because they both have this pseudo open world kind of structure. They both kind of have these points where you have this open world exploration. You go to a point on the map and then it takes you on a linear mission. And then, you have this kind of similar problem of, everything takes place in one location. And so the level diversity is a lot sparser, although somehow a lot sparser here than it was in ODST.
Yeah.
So I feel like if I was ranking 3 at the top. We did this before, Matt. Yeah. We had a whole episode about this. 3 at the top, then 2, then Reach. And I think ODST and Infinite kind of juggle around in my head to me in that weird kind of 4th place where, it really is all to do with that level diversity, where I just feel like that's the big sore spot for me. But overall, I had a great time with it. I thought it was really fun. I thought the open world gameplay of it was a lot more satisfying than I expected it to be. I wish they did more with it, which is probably a common theme that we'll probably be talking about or touching on a lot here.
Yeah.
But overall, I think this is a solid showing for 343. I'm excited for where this can go, given that this is a live service game and what more they can add to it. If they can add sections to the ring, if that's even possible. If they can add story campaigns that focus on completely different characters, that would be really exciting too. I don't know what the possibilities for this game are, but there's a lot that was kind of left at the door, especially with the Banished being, this main threat. Like Atriox is, there's certain spoilery things going on with that that we won't touch on yet. But the thing that I was most baffled by was there's no Banished Scarab. That thing in Halo Wars 2 is awesome. And the first thing I thought of when I saw that in Halo Wars 2, I was like, I can't wait to see that in a first-person game. And nothing. Not a single mention of it. And just like little things like that kind of, man, if I was on the team, these would have been the first things I would have been trying to like push to get in. But this is definitely 343's best outing. I would argue better than even some of Bungie's, especially look, man, I know Combat Evolved is beloved, but I don't know, man. I can't play that game anymore. It's just it's getting to that GoldenEye territory where like I don't know if I can do that game anymore.
That's so funny because when I replayed it before Infinite, I was like, I love this game, man. Like I'm having such a good time here.
They got better with repetitive level designs later on in the. I don't know what this guy's talking about. Better than 2. 2 is like one of the best, but I get what you're saying with like the linearity of it. But overall, listen, I think it's a solid showing for 343. Definitely, it has a lot of strength in the foundation. I just wonder where this goes next and how they continue evolving this, given that this is a platform and we're not supposedly going to see any more numbered sequels for the foreseeable future. So,
yeah.
Cog, let's kick it in your direction. The King is back, as you've so aptly said. Where does this one rank for you? I know you've enjoyed it, but just how much?
Yeah, I mean, I echo a lot of similar sentiments to Chris in the sense that let's just get out the gate. Like, it's the best 343 Halo. Like, that's not even, to me, a question. Over 4 and 5, you know how I felt about 5 and false marketing, and we ain't gonna get into that. But, at the end of the day, it's just like, okay, we have these two. Then it comes down to that the great pantheon. And to me, it's kind of like what Chris said at the last media event. Like Halo 3 to me is always going to be one of the pinnacles. 2, I have a great affinity for. Reach, I have a great affinity for. I'm not as hard on Combat Evolved. It still has the nostalgic feels for me. I still love it. But I think it just comes down to the rest is just like personal preference. But yeah, ODST is right there. But I think for me, where it is the attempt at open world, what they were attempting to do was very grandiose. I'm not going to say they executed every aspect of it, but it left a foundation where the potential is so great for all these other side stories. But if I have to rank it on just what was given, I definitely have it above 4, 5, and probably ODST right now. That's where I'm at right now. But what about you, Matty? Like, now that you've taken a step back, you're sitting on it, and where are you at with this thing, Infinite?
Yeah. It's funny because as I said, I replayed all the Halo campaigns again this past year in preparation for Infinite, and there were some that I fell in love with a little bit more than I recalled. Like ODST to me has like an undeniable charm, and the soundtrack for that game really just puts it on another level, I think.
Yeah.
Where that's kind of ascended the original list that Chris and I made. I was reconnected with Combat Evolved. I was like, yeah, 3's still the GOAT, but like, as a campaign, I think Combat Evolved is just so masterful in like introducing you to what Halo is. So for me, I feel like those are two kind of that original 3 from Bungie plus ODST in a lot of ways is untouchable. I fell out of favor with Reach, which was really surprising to see.
Break that down.
Yeah, I feel like there were parts of the campaign because it's Halo campaigns you can one tap effectively. They're talking 8 hours. If you like the lore of Halo, it is a very cool story, but I didn't connect with the characters as much, which I thought I learned again, Bungie does so well. Like, these are, you don't think of Halo as a character-driven story, and it's not really, but they're so effective with when their characters do speak, and I didn't feel that in Reach. And I was like, it doesn't make it a bad game by any means. I still like it a lot. But I didn't connect with that as deeply. So I would rank Infinite above Reach in the rest of the 343 efforts personally. And it's just that there's a blending of nostalgia and top tier game design that's really hard for 343 to topple with their first outing with Infinite. But I could see the thing with Infinite, given that it's a service game, it's a double-edged sword where I find that frustrating and say I want you to get it right the first time out, but I can see future campaigns and future expansions building this thing above what Bungie has done, which I do think is the exciting premise of it all. So that's why I think they really focus on getting the framework right, because now it's about like, okay, how do we maximize the potential of our gameplay through cool stories in this world? And certainly there are plenty that we can talk about when we get into spoilers.
Before we jump into any open world stuff specifically, how did you guys feel about boss battles?
Ooh, I got a lot to say there.
Yeah.
Hit and miss.
I really liked it. I really liked it. You know, I think for me, it's a combination of two things. I think the banter in this game, the enemy banter in this game, is god tier hilarious to me. I like when they talk and that talk, and especially, you know, we'll get into as far as, you know, Escharum, and we'll get into all the characters. But let's just start even from the beginning, like the tower level. I believe the enemy name is Choklock. He's got the, you know, Spartan tied up or whatever.
Yeah.
And I just felt the tension. It forced me to use the sensor level, the threat sensor to kind of see where he's at. And I just felt a lot of the bosses, I will say this, a lot of the bosses, especially when you play at heroic difficulty, which I felt was like the sweet spot for me, they're very relentless at hunting you down. Like they are coming for you. There is a tension. There is you got to get out of here. You better use your grappling hook. You got, because they're on you. They're not playing. So to me, I like that aspect. I like that pure fear. And I guess it's a combination of the fact that the Banished represent an enemy type that I like, that they don't care. Like, they don't have a respect for the Spartan. Like, they will crush you. A lot of them are like, yo, when we kill him, take his helmet off. I want to see his face. Like, I don't like that stuff. Like, I'm into it. So for me, maybe there was some repetition, but I just love the tension of most of these boss battles. And I love, you know, the fact that the enemies are talking that talk kind of thing. So yeah, I'm kind of high on it with that. But I'm curious, where you at, Chris? Like, are you like, it's a lot of repetitiveness, or did you get into it as far as the bosses? Like, where you at with it?
So I found myself really liking the way they tackled the subject of boss battles in this game, particularly because Halo has tried boss battles before and they've never been particularly good. We've had like, oh, we shoot Guilty Spark with a laser 3 times. Oh, we hop onto a space geriatrics floating wheelchair and punch him in the head 10 times.
I love that part.
And it's really dumb. Like it's funny, and it's like it's not fun, but it's also like this is not the place for boss battles. And I feel like this is the first game, I mean, aside from like the dynamic boss battles like the scarabs in Halo 3, which were more like set pieces that you could interact with. Those I think are like still the pinnacle of like an actual boss type fight in a Halo game. But I feel like the way they implemented them here was like really fun. It was like there was like a lot of character to it. There's a lot of personality to all these guys. And also what I loved about it was the Hitman style nature of it, where you could just go ridiculous with the sandbox, and you could pile up a bunch of fusion coils into a boss room and then just take them out in one shot. And the fact that the game lets you break it in that way. You know, like the fact that it's like, hey, this is a boss, but it's not a Destiny boss. Right. You know, it's not going to have like 8 health bars, and it's not going to make you go through it at a specific pace. It's like, no, these are just alien monkeys. And if you have enough explosives packed in a room, they're done in a shot, in one single blow. And I appreciate the fact that that's the way they went with it, because they could have easily tied you down and put you in an arena and not let you really do much of anything. You had to whittle down health. And that's kind of how I played it the first couple bosses, until I realized that there's a whole sandbox you could take advantage of that I just wasn't thinking about, because these games have never really done anything like this. One that I really enjoyed were the 2 brothers, the guy, the ones, the one on the chopper, and the guy with he was like a jetpack who was jumping from 2 towers. And that fight was so much fun because you could hijack the boss's vehicle, which again, like in most games with boss battles, you can't do shit like that.
Yeah.
So I found the dynamic nature of them and just the fact that, and a lot of this game's strength really is fueled by the sandbox. It really is. Like the sandbox is the star of the show here. It's incredible, and I feel like it elevated the boss fights to something that, very well easily could have been tacked on and very could have easily felt out of place to something that felt like it added to the experience more than it detracted. I never felt like I was grinded to a halt because a boss came, I definitely felt like there were new AI behaviors to learn, like, oh, this guy's like really gunning for you, and just kind of matching the type of shields to the type of fusion coils that would most effectively damage him and stuff like that. It was fun learning how to fight him. Right. Especially the last there's one boss towards the end that's like really cool. And
I know which one you're talking about. That's my favorite one. So I'll personally save that for the spoiler territory, but that was definitely my favorite. I feel like for me it was a little hit and miss. Like the first boss fight with the enemy that kind of just shows its weaknesses pretty apparently. Like, here are my light signs, shoot the hell out of them. I get you got to translate that to the player. To me, when it's too obvious, it kind of breaks the idea of a boss fight, because I love when a boss fight's like organic and I can like look at them as they are and be like, oh, that looks like a weak spot. And it doesn't feel like it's on complete display for me to shoot the hell out of. So I feel like the first boss fight fell into that. There wasn't much build up to it. But afterwards, it did get its own personality, if you will. And I'm with you too. The double brute boss fight was awesome, because you just kind of roll into it. There's no cutscene. Like, it's there. It happens. And you can tackle it whatever way you want. I feel like that really showed what Halo Infinite was all about. And it was one of those like moments you point at the screen, you're like, yeah, I like this game. So I'm with you guys. I don't really have much to add for the boss fights personally. If you guys would like, we can get into the open world.
I did want to add one aspect to the boss fights that Chris kind of touched on, in the sense that he's right, because when I first started, I was fighting more traditionally, right? Not thinking that the sandbox is the ultimate weapon. This is the ultimate things that you can do if you're creative enough with it, with bosses. And what I ended up doing with high value targets and some bosses specifically was that I became a fan of the Razorback. So the Razorback, and then I would get like 4 snipers and 2 tracking rocket launch, and I'm patrolling the map, hunting bosses. Like, it started to become its own little mini game for me. And I thought it was hilarious that 343 is allowing me to have this much fun in this sandbox with majority of the bosses. Now, obviously, when you get into certain levels and we talk about the House of Reckoning, you can't bring the Marines in there. You know what I'm saying? But, and that you could tell that was purposely done, because at some point they're like, okay, you could probably breeze through this entire game if you do it like that. But I just thought the fact that they allowed that, right, was so cool. It was a level of creativity, and they just allowed me to have fun with this, like you mentioned, fusion coils and things like that. So yeah, I'm with you. I thought that was bold game design to just allow it, because most games, as soon as you get to that boss, everything gets stripped down, either extra weapons, extra AI companions and stuff like that gets taken away from you. And I thought for the most part they allowed it. So I thought that was cool.
Yeah, the freedom, especially with the Razorback. The Razorback became, it's funny because like when we're playing multiplayer, we're like, the Razorback sucks. Who the hell's going to get a Razorback, idiot? But it's just a car. It's a Toyota Corolla in the middle of a Halo ring. But in campaign, you load it up with Marines, and as you take down these high value targets that are kind of like spread out through the map, and you unlock these crazy weapon variants. I think it was the Arcane Sentinel Beam, where like I unlocked that thing and I gave it to literally everybody around me, and I rolled them through. I think one of the beam towers. It was like it was like a beam tower mission. And just Marines microwaving people out of existence from like a mile, and it's like the funniest shit, because like these are this is the strongest force in the galaxy. Is just 8 Marines with arcane sentinel beams just erasing grunts and sending them to the great afterlife. It's insane, the flexibility of that, and just like mixing and matching different weapons. Like I remember I would give like I would give some Marines, like I'd have like 1 sniper, like 2 arcanes, like 2 rockets, and then they would go ham, and it was like really cool to see, because it was the first time that I had ever really thought about that. I'm never trading weapons to Marines in other Halo games. Like I'm not. Like I'm taking their.
I always wanted to take care of my Marines, man.
I'd never.
I always set them up to succeed. Yeah, absolutely.
They died so quickly and so easily that I was like, look, you're gonna give me your gun. It'll be worth it. I promise you. And also, I was just used to, like, especially in Halo 2, where like you get the Scarab gun and you have to preserve enemy banshees, so like you kill the Marines around you to prevent them from blowing up the things you need. So like I'm used to, like, Marines are expendable like the entire time until this game, where I was like, I actually found myself caring for the first time in a very, very long time. And just the way that they would react to you, and just some of the stuff, and the banter that is so fun with the enemies, especially like the grunts and
100
and the the elites. Sometimes are like, the enemy has absconded with my vehicle. Just nonsense. And then you have the Marines who are just bringing up, kind of, you could tell there's like a very wink wink nudge nudge thing with the Marines, where they're like, go bring your complaints to Tartar Sauce or whatever that guy's name is. And it's like callbacks to Halo 2, and it's so much fun seeing these Marines with the personality back again, because it's also been a while since we've had that. Even Reach didn't really do much with that, because that was more of a serious tone. 343s have always missed the mark as far as like Marine banter goes, and enemy banter, quite frankly, too. So it's nice to have that back. Yeah, especially in an open world setting where it's just like you can just bring these guys wherever you want.
Absolutely,
it's so fun.
Before Matty moves on, the thing about it, that's why I want to give Joseph Staten his flowers with that, because he was directly responsible for this edition in Halo Infinite, and a part of the delay, because he wanted that. He missed that from the Bungie days. And I thought that was so cool. Like you said, like that banter, like I started to care about them. They'd be like, Chief, you're going to give me this? Okay, Chief. Like they get happy when I give them a good weapon, and, you know, they would just talk when they're killing stuff. And it's so fun. It literally was. I didn't expect to have that much fun with a forward operating base and just managing, giving them stuff, loading them up, and then preparing for the next mission.
Or just even just some of the stuff that when you give them a shitty weapon and they're like, all right, I guess I'll go die then. And it's just the cheekiness and the grunt propaganda towers, and the harassment that the player has to deal with from this grunt who is, by the way, not in danger at all. He's like safe somewhere, just making fun of you. There was this one like he read like a poem to the player at one point, where he was like, oh my god, it was like something about like, your parents don't remember you or whatever, and it's like, oh my god. It's like, what an asshole. But I felt so bad destroying those propaganda towers, because they were so funny to listen to it, and just it was just a joy kind of traversing this open world for as visually boring as it could be a lot of the time. It was still a lot of fun to go through it and kind of experience on an audio visual level, and just sort of just experience the writing, the open world freeform writing of like enemy banter and ally banter. But the main, and we've been talking pretty positively for a little bit, but like we have to bring up, since we're getting into open world discussion right now. Halo Combat Evolved, for as old and as, you know, janky as it is, that game felt a lot bigger. That ring felt a lot bigger, because the environments were a lot more diverse. We got swamplands, we had, you know, grasslands, we had forests, we had snow. And I remember when I saw the trailers for Infinite, I was tweeting about how, like, it doesn't look like we're going to get any environmental diversity at all, because this is an open world game. And if there was diversity, they would have showed it by now. And people were like, nah, man, you're sounding the alarms for no reason, man. You're keeping snow as a surprise. And I'm like, snow isn't a surprise. What? It is just so dumb to keep that as a surprise. So I knew right off the bat that we were not going to be getting like levels like the Ark or Assault Attack on the Control Room, and these like really grandiose set pieces that took place in different arenas that kind of painted a different flavor to the combat. And that was really, really disappointing. And it was the most noticeable lacking point of the game. Like, even if the game was the same size, even if the map was the same exact size as it is, it's like big, but not like super huge. Even if they had like quadrants of it that were like, here's a desert quadrant, here's a snow quadrant, here's a forest quadrant. Even if they did something like that, I feel like I would have enjoyed this a lot more just because the diversity would have been there. But like so much of the time I'm going through grass, trees, and I'm like, this is cool. It looks great. But where's the scale of this ring? You know, this is supposed to be the biggest Halo ring in the lore, and it feels like the smallest. And that's something that I can't help but notice.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I'm the same way. It was one of the biggest stinging points in my review. It's like you kind of feel a pattern as you're going through your as you said, grass, trees, and then you go through like a Forerunner dungeon. You go through like a shipyard, sort of, or like you see the interior of a ship, and it's like, oh, by like the first hour in the game, you have seen everything environmentally it has to offer. And we all know in game development, like asset reusage is like really important to make sure like the costs are low and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a tactful way of doing it. And I'm with you that I just feel like somehow when you go like underground, like there was a way to find some diversity, but there never was. Like every time I was crawling through the Forerunner dungeons, I'm like, just another corridor. To me, it started to just wear me down. I was like, man, this is like hurting everything around it so bad at this point. Like, does it make the story bad? No, but does it make it less enjoyable? Because I feel like I'm slogging through the same visuals to get to the next point. Yeah, definitely. And it made, I guess, visually identifying like little mental set pieces where I could use like the grapple shot. I feel like I connected with it less because I was just like eventually blanketing the whole environment. Like, yeah, here we go, another outpost. Like, yeah, it's about the same shit that I've dealt with all game. It really did hurt. And, you know, of course, that's the benefit of a linear Halo game where they're making set levels and taking you through an adventure. I'm assuming what we're going to see in the future is something like, here's your snow world, and it's just snow. Right. And granted, like, Assault on the Control Room is my favorite Halo level of all time. So it's like, yeah, I'll be over the moon for that. But even then, I'm like, is that really addressing the problem? Like, we want to see all of these different biomes mixing together in one world base. Right.
There's even a desert in the game that like you get. Well, there's a story section where a desert appears, which is not like a huge spoiler, but like, you know, so it's in there. It was in the plans at least, and we know based on reports how much the campaign was cut down. Maybe they had these other areas built, and then they just couldn't get it done. Right. Fair enough, but we have to talk about what's here for us at launch, and the lack of environmental diversity really hurt, especially to me, because you have the perfect excuse to have completely nonsensical level variety. Like Halo rings are they're artificial worlds. There's even like a level in Halo 3 specifically, like the Covenant, which is like one of the best levels I think that's ever been designed for an FPS. It's so good. Where that's the 2 scarabs in Halo 3.
Right.
And you start off in like this you start off on kind of like a pillar, not a what's the Silent Cartographer style kind of island. And then you make your way through this kind of cave. And then on the other side, it's a snowy tundra. Because it's a ring. And it's just like, these are different quadrants that have different weather systems. And it doesn't have to make sense if there's a smooth transition from one to the other. And you have this in-universe explanation where you could just make something hard cut to snow for no reason. And it makes sense. And it doesn't happen. There's also no weather systems in this game, and it's an open world game. I find that a little weird. Why isn't there rain? You know, why can't at least rain? And also, why isn't it ever truly nighttime? I have a flashlight.
Good point.
It would be so cool to actually have like proper, because as dark as it never got truth and reconciliation dark. You know, like it never got as dark as it is in some levels in Reach, and where you had to use night vision, and that was also like a confusing thing, because that alone could have added a lot more variety to it. And just these little decisions, as far as like presentation of the world, where I just felt it was lacking in comparison to even 343's titles in the past. I don't think those games are better. Obviously, we've ranked these already in the first 10 minutes of the show, but Halo 5 had the elite home world. It had a nighttime city on the water. It had you were running down the side of a guardian. It had a lot of variety there, and it's noticeable.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree, especially hitting up Halo 5 around the time I was playing Infinite was kind of jarring in particular. Not to reiterate what you just said, but I mean, really just going through some of the different levels they had and some of the little lore nods they made, I was like, man, this campaign's not really good per se, but it's definitely cool with some of the things they did do with it. Like I always like the mission where like you're crawling underground with Chief and his team, and it's like you hear the hunters stomping around. Like they play with little things a bit more in that game, where with this, it feels like they definitely found a formula they liked that they knew would work and stuck to the books the whole time. They were not going to go off the books until they knew they had something good by the public, where I think they'll get a little more courageous in their next run.
Yeah, that is the benefit of linear design, though.
Yes.
And I don't think, by the way, that means that you can't have an open world Halo game. I think actually the open world is like some of the best. It's like the best thing that this game does on a single player front, like just being able to explore and like move around. The thing that I would have liked to see, though, is kind of like an ODST approach where you have the open world and then you get to a point where a mission starts. And when that mission starts, it's a linear level and they can play with areas that you can't see in the open world or like maybe like set pieces that you normally wouldn't be able to see in the open world dynamically. And that for every mission would have been awesome because we would have had that linearity, those set pieces like in Halo 3 when the ship's coming in from space and everything's being blown back. You're not going to get that here because you can't, because it's open.
Right.
And there's a conversation to be had about whether or not it's what was lost in the translation of the entire game to an open world setting is worth what you had to pay to get it.
Well, let's talk with Walker Simmons real quick, who writes in, "Hey Dukes, I already wrote in a question, but this topic I'm really interested in. Do you guys feel that open world is the future of Halo? I can't help but imagine the gameplay of Infinite, but on a more well-designed variety of maps of the previous games and with more classic set piece moments. Was the jump to open world worth it, or was too much of what made Halo campaigns great lost in the process? For future games, do you hope they expand upon the open world structure or return to a linear campaign?" So, gentlemen, are we convinced this is the format for the future? Because I still don't really feel it is. I feel like it's a fun experiment, and I love the tool set they give you. But I'm like, why not open levels, like 6 big open campaign levels, rather than like open world stuff? I'm not really convinced this is the path forward. I know it's easy to market. I know it's really exciting for a lot of people, and I get why they like it. But for me, upon finishing it, digesting it, going back into it, I was like, I don't know. I don't know why, like, especially as a huge Combat Evolved fan where this game's constantly just saluting it the whole way through. I feel like that honestly a true evolution of what Combat Evolved was maybe not going open world, but like just taking that same level structure they had, which is very wide and open, and bringing that back to Halo. But we had to play off their strengths, and it looks like when 343 tried to make 2 typical Halo games, came up short in a lot of ways. Right. So it's like maybe open world is their path forward, and they can make a fan out of it with me, right? And so I'm not convinced quite yet, but you gentlemen sound a little higher on things. So I want to hear your thoughts. Whoever wants to go first on where you're at with the open world.
I'll jump in. I mean, I think it is the future. I just feel the execution could be better. And that's just where it comes down to. I just think we talked about biome diversity and we talked about transitioning into it. And for me, when I started to get into it and I started to explore, I like that feeling. Okay, what's up there? Oh, I can use my grapple shot. I can go traverse. I can go find out what's going on in this world. Where as the game goes on, it shows it's worth a little bit is because you get the redundancy. And then what ended up happening to me is after I got to clearly closer to the end, before the final, maybe 3 to 4 levels, I was kind of forced into doing a lot of the underground and forerunner structures and auditorium type stuff. And then the next thing you know, I was just remaining in there and there was no more open world, and then the game ended. And I'm just like, oh, okay. I mean, don't get me wrong, the lead up to the game ending, I didn't have a problem with, but I thought there would be a more back and forth. And I felt at a certain point in the game, there was just this cutoff, and it didn't really tell me like, hey, there's not going to be any more open world for you anymore. This is it. Because prior to that, I was doing my Spartan cores. I was going around the map. I was just, doing for high value targets and so on and so forth. So to your point, Matty, I understand your concern. I think where the issue comes down to is, let's be honest, if you're going to do open world, you got to have a lot of interesting things to do in said open world. And where they fell short, it was very rudimentary on certain things, right? I didn't particularly have a problem with it, only because selfishly I have open world fatigue. So I was cool with doing simple things for the most part. But I could see to open world connoisseurs, they're gonna be like, all right, Spartan Core, okay, Marine, trash, Fort Marine Base, high value target, and then that's the loop, right? That's just it, right? So I get it. I just think that they needed more things to do. And I think that the only thing that was okay, and I still felt the execution could have been a little better, was the audio logs. They were okay. They fleshed out some things, but it would have been nice, maybe a couple more cinematics. So, hey, what happened to this team? What happened to Orlowski? What happened to Locke? I know we got a couple of audio logs here and there, and I felt that was their way to try to nudge it, but I didn't feel it was executed right. So overall, just the execution. I don't mind open world. In this case with Halo, I thought I was going to hate it. I thought I was going to dread it. And I ended up having fun. But they've got to do a better job. And like Chris said, the biomes really wore on you. That same one, it wore on you after a while. So, yeah, that's what I got on it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that alone really affects how you feel about it. Just the fact that it's the same map and there's no diversity and there's no weather systems. I feel like that alone would have really added a lot of variety to the experience. And again, I do think the future is a blend. I don't think you want to get rid of those linear missions. I don't think that's a good idea, because some of the most memorable levels in Halo history are all very, very linear levels. Like we talk about like, the first level of Combat Evolved when you crash on the ring and how cool it is to be able to save Marines in whatever order you want. And yeah, that's cool, but it's not as cool as like Assault on the Control Room or even just something. Half the stuff that you do in Halo 2 is awesome. You land on like a different ring and there's all these ancient ruins and you're fighting like sentinels underground and it's such the variety of like what you can get in a linear level is too great to just throw away and replace with an open world structure. I think the happiest middle ground is you have the exact same open world structure that's in Halo Infinite, just a little bit more fleshed out, more stuff to find, more stuff to collect. This is a game that's supposed to be taking cues from Combat Evolved, right? Why can't we find helmets and watch the recordings of like maybe like what happened to certain squads, like you saw with Jenkins when you were when he found the flood for the first time? That would be a really cool way to harken back to the first game and also flesh out the world a little bit more, and it would be a hell of a lot more interesting than an audio log.
I agree.
Where are the terminals from previous 343 entries that they did such a good job? I still remember there was a terminal that they added to Combat Evolved Anniversary of Captain Keyes getting like taken by the flood, and that was like one of the most incredible bits of storytelling in that game, and it wasn't even in the game originally. Like there were a lot of opportunities to flesh out that map with stuff to do, and then once you get to those story points, you can get whisked away to a linear part of the ring where you're in a desert and you're going to find this thing, or like you're off into the tundra to find this thing, and and maybe you have weather systems to accompany that. I do think there's a future here for this formula. I just think they need to understand where the spectacle comes into play for a lot of people's enjoyment of Halo, because seeing those scarabs come down in Halo 3 is such a big thing. And even just music wise, like having music cues associated with specific fights and specific characters and specific locations. Yeah. And I think we have actually something about that.
We'll
we
do.
To that in a little bit.
Yeah. Here, let me read it real quick because I feel it ties it all together. Carlos writes in, "Hey, hope you're all doing well. I want to get your views on Halo Infinite's score and music system, specifically the problem in scoring an open world game. While some of Marty's best themes are there and even elements of songs from Halo 4 are present, I found the overall music experience disappointing. A lot of legendary themes like Heavy Price Paid and Impend aren't present, and the themes that are usually aren't played when traversing the open world. Music moments are often limited to clearing a base/area of interest or one of the missions. Even when you do hear the themes, a lot of the times they devolve into filler beats that lack a bombastic feel like Marty's score. It would be amazing to hear On a Pale Horse when simply driving around in a warthog being a badass. It's difficult to score a game when the game isn't linear with very scripted moments, but I feel like the introduction of more original themes, like those that were specifically made to fill in the long spots of traversal, like the gondola section, would have been a great solution to the problem. So I'm with this guy all the way in the sense that for me, it just never felt like the soundtrack kicked off. And by that, I mean, like, it was always in a state of ramping up. It was always like, dun, 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 but it never like kicked all of a sudden. You're like, now we're going here. Like all of the Marty soundtracks did. It never really felt like that to me. In a way, I got to go back to Reach here. It definitely reminded me of that a little bit, how I felt when I went back to it. I like, there was a EDM kind of feel to Reach at times where it just, where Marty was just having fun with the soundtrack. He's just doing something completely different off the board. That's fine. But it never felt like that soundtrack kicked off it did kick off in more moments than it didn't, but there were times it didn't. And I felt that emotion cropping up a lot in Halo Infinite where I'm like, come on, man. Like, we're here, we're in a boss fight, like get the drums rolling, like this is about to be insane if you can just elevate it with the music. And it never felt like it did. And it was always like you were being blue balled by the soundtrack. I don't know how to define it, man. Like I'm edged. I'm edged by 343.
I know what you mean. It's like when you start, it's like in Guardians of the Galaxy when you do the huddle mode and then like the song ends like 2 minutes after, like not even like a minute into it.
Yeah.
I totally understand that, where like I kind of felt this a similar way, where I remember listening or paying special attention to the soundtrack because I was curious what songs they were going to use and what new tracks they were going to use and kind of implement, and what old tracks they were going to pull out. And I thought that some of the stuff that they pulled was really cool. I think the soundtrack is great, by the way. Like if you listen to the soundtrack by itself, it's fantastic.
Come for y'all.
It's just, I do think the implementation is a little bit off, and I do think the variety is a little bit weird because I feel like they relied on the main theme way too much. Like the main theme plays like 4 separate times throughout the game, and it's like I don't remember that really ever playing in the, like maybe it did and maybe I'm just not remembering it correctly, but there's a section very early on in the beginning of the game where you get into the Pelican and the pilot is taking you over the over the thing, and then it plays like the Warthog Run music, and I'm like, why? We're just nothing's happening. Like this is such a weird thing. I remember the first time that I really felt like the music was getting to a place where like, ooh, this is really cool, was when they had the Halo 2 ending music kick in at the ending of the game. And I was like, I shouldn't have to wait till the exact ending of the game to feel like the soundtrack is really pulling from different places instead of just kind of pulling from the same. Here's a variation of the main Halo theme. The main Halo theme is cool, but there's plenty of other tracks in Halo's history that could have been pulled from with a lot more success, I think. Like the fact that Peril doesn't play at all is really confusing because this whole game feels like Peril to me. Like it feels like that music should be playing constantly, but it's not used once, and it's confusing. It's just a confusing omission, and just I think I agree with Carlos, where I just feel like they didn't pull from as many places as I wanted them to, and when they did original stuff, I do think it worked pretty well actually. But I do agree, like it kind of felt like it was in a constant state of ramping up. And it was just kind of weird.
Cog, you were about to come for us.
So
I got to knock on the door here and see where you're at with everything.
I feel y'all being tough. I feel y'all being, listen, it's greatness, right? So we got to compare it against it. And in fairness to what both of you are saying, there's a standard with Marty, right? There's these epic moments that we know I feel where you're going, Matty, in the sense that you wanted more of that bombastic. Here we are, hit the drums going on a lot of parts, and I feel with Halo Infinite, for the most part, there's a subtlety and a slight buildup. And the subtlety for me, this is when I actually started to really like the music. Again, going back on my forward operating bass, if you listen, is a very subtle theme there. It's a very subtle, and military bass. And I was really getting into it, especially Echo 216, to the point where I was like, yo, what song is that? I bought the soundtrack. I literally bought the sound. I wouldn't know what Gareth is doing. Now, to me, the standouts with 3 particular ones. One was Echo 216. Whenever you get him. And then the second one was actually Escharum. It was a very dark, foreboding. Every time he took the screen, it was a banished feel. And I liked it, And the last one I thought was a really cool, nostalgic callback it's the stage called The Road. And you get the tank and you're about to traverse onto the House of Reckoning. And then you gotta, and I felt that was the first time I got to feel that. I know you want it, Marty. I mean, Matty. I know you want it. I know I'm calling you Marty now. Oh, no.
Oh, no.
Like, I know you wanted more of that. And I just think it was a different approach. I don't think he went necessarily for the bombasticness on every boss battle and everything like that. But I thought it was cool. I put it this way. I guess I didn't feel angry like yo, what's going on? What are you guys doing? I just felt like it was just like a different approach and a subtlety and then a build up. But I definitely hear what you guys are saying. And I think the last thing was they had a lot of cues, especially like the keeps. There was a lot of these little audio cues they would do, and it's hard to describe it. And I just liked it, man. I don't know how to verbalize it. It was just it was a more subtle approach to the music and the story integration than normal. But I can understand the position of a classic Halo guy saying, "Yo, this is not hard enough to get me excited." It just, for me, it just resonated differently with me.
I don't know. I didn't even feel necessarily that I needed more bombastic music. For me, it was just the variety of the styles of music that they chose. Like, I feel like it was like, again, like Escherum's theme is great, and there's a lot of great music here. I just feel like a lot of it draws from the main theme, and it's just a little weird because like a lot of it's like, you have like ba 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 ba, but then you have like a slower one where it's like bum. Ba-ba-ba, bum, ba-ba, and it's like the same thing, but it's slower, and it's like, okay. And I think about like the Halo 2 soundtrack, where there's no song on that soundtrack that sounds like another one. Right. And I don't know, I would have liked to hear some of that variety, like, so even the softer stuff, like, where it's just really slow and sad violin that doesn't sound like it's trying to get you pumped necessarily. But that's it. Like, I do think it's a really nice audio spectrum. Like, I don't think it's bad by any means. It's still definitely like a much more solid game to hear than most other games that I've played. But I don't know. I can't help it. It's hard to compare it to something so well scored.
Right.
like again, a trilogy of linear games that has the benefit of understanding where the player is at any given moment and having trigger volumes associated with, it's a very different thing. But The Road was they were using the Warthog Run music. And I remember being in a tank and having that tank feel like paper mache. So I'm like, the soundtrack is like celebrating me. It's like, you're doing great. And I'm like, I'm on fire. And I feel really weak, and there's like a dissonance between like how the game wants me. The game seems to egg you on to like, go. You're in a tank, go tear shit up, and then you're gone. I don't know. It's a very difficult. It's really hard to articulate this criticism because I feel like you do have to play it to really. Yeah. And even then, everybody's going to have a completely different experience of it.
Music is so personal. It's hard to kind of like equate that. But I do understand to me, it's measuring greatness. And we all agree that those ones that came before are like pinnacle level feels and correlation to specific levels where you get that callback. That's all.
Yeah.
But
And on this soundtrack specifically, Through the Trees is fantastic.
Oh yeah, amazing.
Fantastic recreation of a walk in the woods that I think is so perfect.
Yep.
With that, it's time we flip on spoiler mode. We've given them enough to listen to. If you have not played the game, this is your cue to shut things off, because we are going to get into everything from the ending to the main villain to chief, weapon, echo, boss fights, everything. Filters off right now. So come back later if you plan on playing the game. Otherwise, welcome to spoiler mode. I want to start off with Escharum, our main villain. Mark Grouch writes in, "Hey there, Duke boys. I want to start by saying I think this is the best Halo game 343 has made, though that isn't saying much. That being said, I wanted to talk about Escharum. I saw a lot of reviewers, including Matty, call him a great villain. I was shaken by this because I found him to be the stereotypically written, like mustache twirling villain of the weak bad. And incredibly boring because we all knew he was going to get his ass beat by Master Chief in the end. 343 and Creative Assembly had built up Atriox in Halo Wars 2 and given fans a proven villain with sensible motivations. So when Infinite started and we were given Atriox versus Chief, which I had been waiting for, I was over the moon. Fast forward an hour or so into the game and Atriox is just dead and we're left with Escharum. The whole game I was left thinking they killed off Atriox for this guy. As if that wasn't bad enough, once Escharum is dead and the credits roll, 343 reveals that Atriox was alive the whole time. So what the fuck was the point of Escharum besides being a beefy bad guy for you to fight? Hope you have a Don Matrick kind of day."
Yo.
Yeah, how dare you say such a thing? Well, he took you to point specifically. So what do you feel?
Yeah, I liked Escharum because I feel like, to me, it's funny because they're not humans, but I'm going to use the term anyway, humanizes in a way. I understood the Banished cause a lot more through him than I feel I connected with Atriox in Halo Wars 2. Now, we talked about earlier how the nature of an RTS, I think it is difficult to connect with a campaign compared to any cinematic first-person shooter. But, this ties into a bunch of different tendrils. Like when you learn, hey, Cortana took the Guardians and destroyed their homeworld, and now you understand why they're on a warpath. They're more emboldened than ever, and he's their leader. And when you see through Halo Wars 2 and what happened to Atriox in the beginning, technically, like there's a power vacuum that's been created, like only Decimus could stand up. And when you hear, I don't remember the exact line, but what Chief said, I think Chief is what brought him to that higher status for me. When Chief beats Escharum and he's like leveled with him, he's like, he was a soldier fighting for what he believed in. He's no different than us. I love that. To me, that's those things of bringing them on the same level is what made Escharum a great villain. I get the perspective of like, why throw this guy in here? But I feel he has played such a vital role in why this game will be successful in the future as a story. And it's because it made a good villain group, which, when we just saw us go through the Prometheans for 2 games, and I thought they were kind of cool, but they never connected really.
Yes.
I feel like they did a good job with the Banished here and made them not only interesting, but fearsome. I feel like they were a force to be reckoned with. So that's kind of my too long didn't read thoughts on why I think Escherum's a great villain. I want to bounce it to one of you two. Where are you guys at with Escharum? And did you think he landed as well as he did for me?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I'm alone. It's funny because I'm listening to Mark, and the things he's had the problem with, actually, I didn't have a problem with, because this is how I looked at it. Like when I first booted it up and we got that moment, remember Matty, we was talking, like, to me, I call this the Infinity War moment. I always wanted someone to handle Master Chief. My issue with Chief has always been he's just too dominant. He's just, he's going to win, right? So I played Halo Wars 2, shout out to Addict, maybe play it, and I learned about Atriox. I'm like, okay, this is what they setting up. I get it. In the first 5-10 minutes, he dragging Master Chief by the foot. I was like, oh yes. Then he grabbed him up by the throat and says, I did this to you. I want you to know this is the last face you gonna see. I'm like, yes, this is what I'm talking about. Y'all hitting the ground running. Now, to Mark's point, I was at first like, yo, what's going on? Where's Atriox? Who's this Escharum dude? So at first, I'll be honest, I was a little like, okay, I don't know what they doing here. And I was like, I gotta see. Now, as it went on, I'm like, okay, They don't know what's going on. They're clearly leaving a little mystery here, but this guy is executing the will of Atriox. Fine. We get it going. What I like about him is he's looking for this challenge. He feels he has not faced anyone to really, like, basically told you, he's like, bro, we got your Infinity up out of here in 4 minutes. like, we got you out. Like, what do you think you're going to do, you little sport? I can't wait to handle you. Now, as he sends his generals, and his generals are getting defeated, then you start to see, okay, John 117 is living up to the legend that he was told. And now you can see the respect. And it started to get, we get to the House of Reckoning. Okay, we're going to give you a little basic training. We're going to give you a little advanced training. Okay, all right, you serious. So now, then he starts to have the seed of doubt. If I die on this battlefield, right? You know what I'm saying? Like, it could be on. And I agree with you completely. Where I really connected with Escharum for me was when you beat him. Because his whole thing was like, yo, tell them I fought, you know what I'm saying? Like, with honor, I went out like a G, like he wanted. It was all about the thrill of the fight and the challenge. My only negative that I will give Mark Rush, but there's only one thing I'm going to complain, nitpick, is that he was very dominant. And then as you get to the middle end of the story, all of a sudden you get this cough thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, bro, you wasn't sick before. Why are you sick now? What's going on with this sick? I didn't know when. Maybe I missed something. You guys educate me if I missed something. I felt like they just put up a sign of weakness somewhere that I didn't see, and maybe I missed something. So that was the only thing. But other than that, I really enjoyed him. And to end this point, to Mark's point, is that I love the fact that Atriox was not killed. I love the fact that he wasn't killed off screen. That's
stupid if they,
because I would have been so pissed.
No chance. No chance of that happening. I was never convinced that he was dead because like, there's no way they would. First of all, that was such a great introduction of him just like handling it. The mass just for him to die off screen doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But with some off-screen deaths,
we're going to get to that. I know.
You know, that's why that was the only thing that I had going for me. I was like, they would fuck this up, wouldn't they? They would. So
because it's 3-4-3. So I'm like, yo, bro, I don't know if they really going to kill my man off screen. Like, this is what we're doing.
Right. They have done that before.
So they was trepidation.
That's actually not a bad point. That's kind of using their own missteps as a way to kind of like give the story a little bit more weight and a little bit more mystery. It's kind of not a bad idea.
It did end up working that way now that we mention it.
But overall, like, I'll give it to you. Get it, Chris. But overall, I didn't have a problem. I didn't have a problem.
Look, I'm the wrong person to bring this complaint to because I love mustache twirling villains. Like, I love, like, even, dude, you look at Halo 2 and all of those guys are like Shakespearean. Like, every single one of the Prophet of Truth is like, the weight of your heresy will stay your feet. You shall be left behind. And it's like, it's so over the top, and I love it.
I love it.
Because they're just, it reminds me of, and this is just fresh in my mind from certain things that are irrelevant to this, but actors really chewing up the scenery of the role and just being like a perfect villain and just sort of like being like, you know what, I'm gonna take up the entirety of the screen on this performance. I'm gonna eat the scenery. This is my role. And I think Escharum does that so well. Like, I loved what they did with him. And especially like you guys have touched on everything, especially at the end when it just sort of comes to this point where it's like, yeah, he was doing what he thought was right. And how could you blame him after everything? They're just trying to survive on this ring because they have no home. And now the guilt on Chief is like crazy now. Cause like I love the aspect of, and I will admit, man, I'm getting a little sick of the whole like, oh, Cortana Chief story, because we've been doing it for 3 games now. It was never really that much of a central part of the first 3 games, in my opinion. It was always this kind of like side thing to kind of keep things grounded.
Interesting.
But when it became the central focus of like 4, I was like, okay, cool. Ah, she's dead. All right, that was a nice little thing. Oh, she's back. And then in this one where it's like the whole game is about Cortana again, I was like, okay, all right. I want my space opera really bad, but I guess we can do this again. And I feel like Escharum gave me that space opera, you know, that feeling of like, oh, finally we have these 2 like battle hardened people going against each other, and the way that it ends is so cool. And my one complaint with Escharum really is just the fact that he really only interacts with you through holograms. That's like the only thing, because the Prophet of Truth was a lot more dynamic than that. Like he would taunt you through video communications. He would like speak through the loudspeakers at you when you were in High Charity in Halo 2. He would like, even when when the Gravemind teleports you in front of him, and Chief picks up the needler and he aims it at him and he goes, "Kill the demon." And there's just a little bit more of an interaction between the player and Escharum by the time you actually in Halo 3, or I don't mean to say Escharum, the main bad guy. Then by the time in Halo 3, Arbiter kills him, you kind of feel like that was a little bit more earned. Whereas this time it felt a little bit more like the last half felt like a lot of the game trying to earn that kind of, even with like the sickness thing, which was in the audio logs, but
okay, I missed it.
But yeah, of course, I feel like most people probably would. So that part felt a little rushed to me, but I thought he was a great villain, and it made perfect sense that they wouldn't want you to fight Atriox in this game, because Atriox has not really been introduced in a mainline game, and this is a great way to introduce him, and a great way to introduce him in such a way that people can go back to Halo Wars 2 and kind of learn more about him if they want, but they don't have to, because a lot of Atriox's motivations and a lot of his character is kind of explained through Escharum being who he is.
Yeah,
he's his mentor.
Yeah,
so you have to assume, and now the stakes between Atriox and Chief are even more personal.
Yes,
because now, hey, you took out my mentor figure. Your AI destroyed my homeworld. There has to be a lot of rage towards Chief.
Yes.
Now, because Escharum exists. And what he does for the story is like really exciting. Especially the way it ends, which as a bit of a lore nerd is a very, very exciting place for this story to end, especially if you've seen the legendary ending.
I actually haven't. I wasn't aware of that. I still
extra dialogue at it.
Oh, okay.
The legendary ending is the same as the normal ending. It's Atriox opening the Silexes,
right?
Except this time there's audio playing from a long, long time ago. Like I think 70 years after the rings were fired or something, and it's talking about keeping the Endless contained. And we'll get into that stuff in a little bit. But it ends with some unknown Forerunner saying, offensive bias has been deployed.
Yeah.
Which is
huge.
So exciting from a lore perspective, because that's the AI. That is such like an insanely important AI in the story. And I've been waiting for that character to come up since Halo 3. I don't understand why it's taken this long, but super exciting. And the way they got there with having Atriox be a part of that is awesome. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to whatever the hell they go from here, because I thought they handled it super well. Even if some of it was a little like the Endless came out of nowhere, and I was like I was a little confused about that one, but
that kind of segues perfectly into what I had as a big issue with this game, and it'll take us all over the place from there. Mike LaValle writes in, "Hey guys, as mostly a PlayStation user over the years, I didn't have the opportunity to play some of the later Halos until the collection came out. That said, my friend in high school had an Xbox, and I played an unhealthy amount of Halo 1 and 2. I played Reach with the collection, but I've yet to complete the other campaigns. I liked how Infinite gave you just enough story in the beginning of the games to fill in the gaps about Cortana for those of us who never finished 3, 4, or 5. How do you feel about the campaign specifically comparing to the rest of the series for its story?" And he says as a side note that the Infinite multiplayer is phenomenal. I feel like 343 is really listening to the community and making regular updates. It's nice to have a product in 2021 that isn't mostly broken. I see you, Cyberpunk. Thanks, gents. Appreciate everything you guys do. I thought this was kind of a good opening, because he mentions how, hey, I never played 3, 4, or 5, but I kind of got a good gist of what was going on with Cortana there. That there was a lot of things that are handled like in audio logs. It's a lot of things that are brushed under the rug. I mean, I called it in my review, like you effectively had a Last Jedi moment with Halo 5, where moving into Rise of Skywalker, it's like, okay, we have to clean up the old mess and create the new thread in the meantime. And I felt like there was a lot of that energy there. And I know a lot of people don't like that. Anytime you bring up Last Jedi, it only spawns arguments about Star Wars. So I hope with our very mature Patreon audience, we can just put that to the side for a little bit until this goes out for free. For me personally, I felt there was a lot of time spent cleaning up that mess. And so unfortunately, things had to be brushed under the rug. Like, I like Cortana a lot as a character. I kind of like that 343 and Halo 4 shifted a more central focus on her. I thought it was an interesting turn of events. I feel like they mishandled it in 5, but that shouldn't have meant that in Infinite, for example, she's just like off screen. She's gone. Mm-hmm. She's gone. And guess what? Weapon? Yep, that's her. Like, to me, there was a lot of the washing of the hands. You kind of got that vibe with Atriox at first. Putting them off screen and kind of doing that, you started to get like a bad taste in your mouth. I feel there's a lot of things that were handled through audio logs, which I don't know how else to put it, but like that worked with BioShock back in like what year did that game come out? Like 07, where it's like, you don't know this thing because we can't put it in the game as a cutscene. So like here it is in an audio log. Like I feel like Halo Infinite fell into that a little bit, and it makes sense. They're like, oh, here's where Lasky might be because we don't have the time to show you that in the game. We don't have time to hint at that.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of off-screen storytelling occurring. I want to know, I think there was a give and take with it. I do think it's not all bad because I think they managed to successfully clean up a lot of the mess and just kind of get it out of the way. But as you brought up, Chris, like the Endless kind of just come out of nowhere. They're like, this is a threat worse than the Flood. And I'm like, and then you see Skimmers come out of nowhere. You're like, are these the guys they're talking about? Like, because everything had to happen so quickly, it felt like there was a misplay on some of the execution with bigger moments. So I want to know, with that kind of setup there, where of course you gentlemen are at with the storytelling in general, whether it be on or off screen.
Let's get it. Chris, you going?
Yeah, I think it's weird because I paid a lot of attention to a lot of the extraneous lore this past year. So like I might be the odd man out, where the Endless still kind of came out of nowhere. That was like a very weird thing. I didn't like the Harbinger at all. It just reminded me of the Didact the first time, or not the Didact, Warden Eternal, where who are you? Why are you here? Why do you speak this way? You're just needlessly cryptic for no reason, and it's not even like an entertaining cryptic like the Gravemind was, where you're like speaking riddles, and he had this great performance by D. Bradley Baker. It was just Deborah Wilson. Like it was like cool, but who is this? Why do I care? Why is this important? How could you possibly be worse than the Flood? You realize you have to justify that somehow. And I don't know how they're going to do that. I do think the audio at the end of the Legendary ending paints a little bit more of a clearer picture of how they might plan to do that. And that's exciting. But initially, I was just a little bit confused about that. One thing in particular that bothered me about the presentation of the story was, and this might be just me, because I've had a lot of people disagreeing with me on this. These single shot cutscenes don't do anything for me.
I'm with you.
I don't think they added anything stylistically. I think they made for a lot of boring cutscenes because they couldn't frame things particularly interestingly. You don't get any of those great set pieces like Chief with the bomb in 2, or even just the execution of the Prophet of Truth by the Arbiter in 3, or really any of the cutscenes in previous games that I think are just framed a lot better and presented a lot better and staged a lot better than they are in this, because most of the time in this game, it feels like people are just staring at each other or like talking to each other or just standing next to each other. And there's like some really awkward camera shots because the game has to seamlessly go from one transition to the other. And then I remember this one cutscene where you're like really close to the weapon's face and it looks like an accident.
Yeah. Like, oh my God. When she's like asking for deletion, right? And it keeps like zooming in on her.
Yeah. And it's like
where you can like see her teeth up close and personal.
Yeah. And it's like, this doesn't look good. They could have, if they could just allow for a cut every now and again, this would be a lot more interesting. And I understand it did come with like some positive side of it. Like the fact that your weapon transitions into cutscenes now instead of, it's better. I like in-engine cutscenes more than pre-rendered stuff. It allows for some more hijinks. It feels a little bit more immersive, but that doesn't mean you have to do this single shot thing where it's just sort of panning in and out and you have these awkward stagings, and I feel like that kind of took away from a lot of the dramatic weight of what was happening sometimes, because it just felt like some guy with a drone just sort of hanging out with Chief and just arbitrarily popping in to say what's up. And the presentation of it I didn't love, but I do think the story threads there are really cool. I like the pilot a lot. I like the weapon a lot. And I like Chief a lot in this game, a lot. Like way more than like they did a lot of really cool character work in Halo 4. Like, I don't mean to discount that game, because for all of that game's faults, that story is really, really well done for the most part. And the character interactions are really well conceived and really well thought out. But this game really was the first time that I felt like they had a perfect marriage of that old school one-liner, I've got to do my job, Master Chief, and the more introspective character that we know is there. One moment in particular, like there's a specific line of dialogue. Well, I can't remember what the weapon says, but it's when the weapon and Chief are fighting. Which, by the way, I love that dynamic.
Love that.
Where she's like angry with you, and the Chief is just silent. But there's something that the weapon says where it's like, she goes like, "Oh, they'll all something," and the Chief goes like, "Will they?" And it's like there's something like sarcastic about it, and I'm like, "Whoa, this is really cool to see."
I agree.
And I loved a lot of that. And I think while the plot is a little messy and it's very clearly trying to wash its hands from a lot of the mistakes made in Halo 5, and there's very clearly an effort to kind of right the ship a lot quicker than maybe the game has time to earn, I think a lot of that stuff kind of melts away in the background for me, because the actual character interactions are so damn good.
I feel you.
Even if they're not framed in the most cinematic way. Just that scene of Chief and Pilot sitting down, and he's just talking like, I feel super guilty, and I've failed people before. I'm not going to fail you. And just this is crazy to see the Master Chief talking like this, and it doesn't bother me, because it bothered me like crazy in Halo 4 and 5 when he just wouldn't shut up. He wouldn't stop talking. And I don't know, man. I agree with a lot of the complaints of the plot. I think it's a little messy, and things kind of come out of nowhere, and there's a lot of convenience. But I think the characters really, really drive it, and it's the main reason why I feel like this is honestly one of the stronger stories. Just because I feel like it's a lot more grounded and believable. Because Halo 4, as cool as it was, like I just didn't believe that was Master Chief that whole time. Like he says 3 lines of dialogue in Halo 3, and then suddenly he wakes up. From his perspective, it's been 10 minutes maybe, and suddenly he just doesn't shut up. I don't buy it. Like, it's too weird. It's unearned.
It made it where, like, since he was such like a one sentence specialist for most of Infinite, when he did sit down with Echo 216, when he was kind of having that little breakdown, and he did start talking, would say for Chief standards, more elongated sentences, it was more impactful, right? Because he was like a surgeon with everything else he said. It was just like quick, to the point, effective, like an assassin. And then
totally, when
he actually sits down and vibes a little bit with Fernando, what's his name? Fernando, I think it was.
Esperanza or something.
When he sits down and vibes with him, I was like, I like how they're doing this. It's definitely my favorite rendition of Chief in a lot of ways. I'd say.
Especially the gameplay, when he's talking through gameplay. I remember there was this one point where he's like, "Oh, why do you do this if you have nobody you care about?" And it's like, "Well, that's all I know."
I caught that. I
remember being like, "Damn." I'm like flying a wasp to kill like a high value grunt, and all of a sudden this shit gets dropped on me, and I'm like sad all of a sudden.
It was real, man. I mean, this one, it's so funny because I have so many emotions about it, and it's the initial emotion I have with playing it. First of all, I like it a lot, right? I like Halo Infinite's campaign a lot. With Halo, the vibe I got coming into it is that 343 low-key went to retcon Halo 5. That's the
for
vibe
sure.
I got. Like, they purposely went out their way to not give you direct answers to Halo 5 after the 5 to 6 years or whatever it's been that now Halo Infinite's come, because the player is assuming if you've played all the main lines that you're going to get at least some of these answers. Not all, but you're going to get some. And to me, that showed there was some level of mistake or internal debate with the studio on how they're going to handle it, because my only issue was that the way Halo 5 ended, like, Cortana is made to be the big bad. Like, the rampant scene and things, she's got the Guardians, she's got this arsenal, it's on and cracking, and then it's like, oh yeah, now she's dead, but we're going to figure out what happened, right? And I just felt the execution of that, they may have wrote themselves into a corner, and maybe now Infinite is kind of, all right, we're going to peel some of this back and we're going to give it to you slowly as to why that happened, but it wasn't as important as you thought it was. Like, that's the vibe I got, right? So I'm sitting there and playing it, but I'm with you, Chris. Where the game turned the corner for me narratively was when the weapon is like, yo, why don't you trust me? What is going on? Like, I'm trying to help you. You're not giving me anything. And then he starts doing the deletion sequence. And she was like, oh, you was about to delete. You what? And the distrust happens. And she starts going in on him. And then Echo's like, yo, what's going on? I haven't heard anything. Oh, yeah, you know, he's just a silent. He's just going to kill everything. Like, it was a complete flip on it. And I loved it because he's distrustful based on what happened with Cortana, and then you start to learn, okay, we made a copy, you know, in this case with Halsley, you know, in case something happened again. And then where Weapon really turns the corner and was like, oh my God, I can't believe she did this. This is what she did. This is why you kind of feel the way you feel. And then they kind of rebonded again. And I like that aspect. With the Cortana thing, especially, there's a big controversy in the community right now, and I do empathize with this one thing. You know, the style of cutting these cinemas, I'm with you, Chris. It got a little redundant after a while. But the controversy, what I do feel, is that with a character as big as Cortana, as epic as she is, that's been around for every mainline Halo, you know, she does deserve an on-screen cinematic death, as opposed to, you know, the echoes, the whispers, and the thing. Like, we know that she died, but I do feel we needed to see that. We've been with this character for so long, and I just felt like, damn, like we couldn't got a little cinema, a little something. That it was a good goodbye, you know. I did like that part. That part got a little emotional. It was cool, but I do feel that Cortana deserved that, and I don't understand that logic. That's my main beef with it. But other than that, I thought everything else was handled well. I felt Master Chief's like his dialogue was subtle but impactful. You got every weight of why he acts the way he acts and thinks the way he thinks, and then towards the end, when, like I said, the rebond, and then now they go to the I'm with you though on Harbudge. I was like, okay, whatever. You're here. Why are you here? Okay, you know, the fight was a little annoying to me, but whatever. And I clearly know that they're going for the endless, and they're going to set up more stories and stuff like that.
Right.
To me, this is a foundational piece. They have way more stories to tell. I think that part's great. I wasn't mad at the ending, but I do empathize with the Cortana contingent of the community that wanted just a little bit more with her. And that's the only thing I say. But I did enjoy this campaign a lot.
Yeah, I that didn't bother me so much because I feel like our proper goodbye to Cortana was already perfectly handled in Halo 4.
Yeah,
so like,
okay.
But to me, it's just like we're doing this goodbye again. I don't know. I just want to see more characters, man. Like, I want to see what's Arbiter doing right now. Where's Lord Hood? Where's like there's so many Guilty Spark is alive, by the way. Where's he? So like there's a bunch of shit that, like, I don't know, like seeing Cortana say goodbye for the 50th time. It's like,
I agree, and that's why I feel they wrote themselves in the corner, because technically, the Cortana thing could have ended with 4. He said his goodbye. It was over as far as I'm concerned between them. But then they did 5, and they made her this thing, and now you got a base that's like, okay, we got a redemption arc. Sort of, right?
5 was just such a mess. Like, it's such a shame. They really could have just not had this problem at all if they just did continue the story naturally. But I, for what it's worth, I do think this game is narratively and design-wise, like, just the best like them making the best out of a bad situation.
Yes.
Where they had
Yeah.
they had a terrible 5th game. They just did. It was bad story wise, and also the development trouble of this game is like crazy.
Yeah.
So because there are scenes in the campaign trailer that are just straight up not in the game.
Yeah.
Mhm.
There's specifically a scene that's very clearly Chief talking to offensive bias that's not in the game.
Wow.
Which seems to me like they had a Halo 2 type situation here where they were like, all right, well, we got to cut the last act, the third act of the game.
Yeah.
That's what it feels like to me. It's like the third act of the game is missing, and it feels like a Halo 2 situation again where it's so interesting how much this game does mimic Halo 2, where it's just like it's so much fun, but it feels unfinished. And even the multiplayer, it's like really, really fun, but it's really broken kind of a little bit, but it's in a good way. And there's something to be said about Halo games that go through just tumultuous dev cycles, and how they just end up being kind of great.
Yeah.
Like it's very weird. Like Halo 4 and 5 had pretty smooth sailing dev cycles, and those are not particularly loved. So I don't know, maybe it's like a necessary evil. These games have to go through hell in order to be
you say that.
In order to be like really cool.
Because the Power, Matty, the Power On documentary, when I learned about Halo 2, and I'm looking at the parallels with Staten and the delay and needed the time, it eerily mirrors
super similar.
Yeah, very much so.
Let's talk with Adam Turley, because we're already talking about the weapon. We're talking about Cortana. I want to stay on that path a little bit.
Sure.
He writes, "Hey guys, short and sweet. Will the weapon choose the name Cortana or something else? I've seen some interesting theories and like the idea that she chooses the name Joy based on how the original Cortana got her name, but I'm hoping for anything other than Cortana. That name belongs to only one AI." So yeah, that's the thing we learn at the end, is that effectively, long story short, the weapon is Cortana. And the game does, I think, a good job of kind of like holding that behind their back. Like you have your suspicions, but I feel like when they revealed it, it didn't feel as forced as I kind of expected it to be. Where, you learn like she was locked down, she did destroy Cortana, but then like when you learn what Cortana did to the ring to kind of in a last ditch effort save humanity and keep a companion around for Chief that is effectively her again, I thought it was really well done. Where I want the weapon to be her own person, and I'm like, does that mean she ends up being Cortana because that's what we know, or does she pick something else? And I really wouldn't be upset with either. I think she should pick a different name personally, but they seem to both have a mutual like, we know at the end of the game, Chief and the weapon, where I'm like, I think they're gonna go Cortana.
Yeah,
I'm with you, man. I think that it feels like they're nudging that direction, that they're going to go Cortana. I'm with you, though. I would like another name because I do feel out of respect for what came before. You can't. But then I start thinking about Microsoft marketing. And don't they have like
everyone
the trademark? Yeah, don't they have like their version of Alexa is called Cortana or whatever? So I'm like, it's going to be called Cortana. I don't want it. But it's just like, I would be shocked if they really stick to their guns and weapon gets a unique name like a Joy or whatever. I would personally like that, but I see business taking over. That's just that's my thinking on this.
Yeah, I don't know if I mind either, to be honest, because like the whole time I'm playing the game, I'm like, that's Cortana anyway. Like, so it's not our Cortana, but there's already an established idea in Halo lore that you can have several versions. There's even a theory that the Cortana that we see in 5 isn't even like it isn't even Cortana really. It's like a fragment of her memory or whatever the hell. So it doesn't bother me too much, the idea that like she might continue to be called Cortana. And I think the reason why it doesn't bother me is because I like her.
Yeah.
If I couldn't stand her, that would be really egregious. Yeah. Because then it would be like, oh my God. It's like your dad dies and a clown like walks into your apartment like a year later wearing his clothes and goes like, look, it's me, it's Dad. And it's like, no, you're a clown desecrating my father's memory. So like, I think this is like a little bit less egregious to me, where it's like, all right, yeah, if she wants to be called Cortana, fine. It didn't bother me, the idea.
It's like not to get, really graphic, but it's like, you lost a puppy, and, it's a dog, and it's like, here's the new puppy. It's going to have the same name. And it's like, all right.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I get it, kind of. It's interesting. I'm not going to go crazy about it either way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to invest.
It's a little bit different because it's the same brain and personality. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's kind of the thing where it's like, if your dog died of natural causes, you just put that dog's brain into a new body.
Sure, yeah.
Why? You know what I mean? Like, it's to me, it's just fine. Like, it's not going to be the biggest deal to me if they go with that name. I was expecting when the pilot revealed his name, I was expecting that to have some significance.
Yeah.
I was expecting. Yeah, it was just, oh, you're a guy. You're just some guy. I thought it was going to be like, it was going to have like a last name that I recognized. Like, oh, are you like a Keys or something? Like,
right.
Yeah, I was reading apparently the voice actor for Echo named him as a character after like his two childhood friends or something like that. Like it wasn't
oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it wasn't like a lore thing. Like they just let the character name Echo. Like I guess maybe his whole name the whole game was going to be Echo, and then like they gave him that moment to be like, what do you want to call him? And that's what was chosen. That's what
That's kind of cool.
Yeah,
I kind of like that. I do like that he is an Echo 419 kind of callback. Except he doesn't die. Yeah. I thought he was going to die for sure.
I thought he was going to die for sure.
I thought so too. I was like, Comet Evolved. I was like, yeah, this man's not going to be here long, huh? But he
Brohammer ain't here to stay.
Yeah. We've already gotten to our issues. I had that here on the doc. I say we get into the future and of course some lingering topics as well. We'll hit the lingering topics first because the future will be a good wrap up. Let's talk about the Endless, shall we? In a little more detail, a little more depth. So the way this game sets up the Endless, as we already said, it felt kind of like, oh, here they are. They were told to be worse than the Flood. They were a race that was imprisoned by the Forerunners. It's why the Harbinger's around, and she strikes a deal with the Banished where she's going to provide Forerunner access to the Banished, and the Banished will help her find the Silexes. And at the end, we see their Silexes are discovered by Atriox, right?
Yeah.
And then I also wanted to just tag on with this conversation because we saw the trademark Halo the Endless, which will likely be the next campaign expansion for Halo Infinite. And there was a mid-credits scene leak that I put here in our doc and that people can look up if they're curious, which was cut from the game, but someone was picked up on the Pelican by Chief and Echo 216. And there's been a ton of theories, like, is this the Spirit of Fire from Halo Wars 2? Is this how they're going to bring in co-op? Like, they've detected someone. Like, they don't say who it is. Like, the cool part is it could be literally anybody. And anybody. And so with those two kind of combined, and of course, talking about the future, what do you think about the Endless, this leak scene that got cut from the game? Do you think it'll play a factor later on? Will it tie into this new campaign thing, or will it just be a campaign feature like co-op and how it's going to be introduced? Chris, I want to start off with you because I know you said you've been banging on with the lore a little bit here. So how are you feeling about all of that?
Yeah, man, I don't know. Like I was kind of shocked to see this because there's a lot to consider with this cutscene because this game's been kind of cut to pieces and you can kind of tell. So is this the original mid-credits scene for like after the next expansion? You know what I mean? Like where is this supposed to happen? Is this supposed to introduce a new feature? Doesn't seem like it if they were trying to have that from the beginning.
Right.
Doesn't seem to make sense that it would be like introducing a new feature like campaign co-op. So to me, it seems more likely that it is a proper character, and it could be the way. It's weird because like at the end of that cutscene, the pilot smiles.
Yes,
which indicates some level of familiarity. But I don't know from what perspective I'm supposed to be looking through the pilot's eyes at, like, because like to me that's like, oh, Arbiter, but there's no way that's going to happen because you can't play as an elite in Halo Infinite yet. So that doesn't seem like it would be the case. The Spirit of Fire, well, neither of them know anything about the Spirit of Fire, but that's the only other thing that it could be. Maybe the Infinity. But the Infinity's destroyed.
Yeah.
So maybe it's Lasky, but like, how did he get into space? there's a lot that this could be. I would love it to be Arbiter, man. Like, that would make my
find a way.
Even I don't know how they would justify him being there, but it would be nice to see and hear him again, and actually,
watch them interact,
exchange fucking words. Jesus,
yes.
like that is the most great. Like, dude, even Cortana being a bad guy, that whole story being as bad as it would have been all like less egregious to me if Chief and Arbiter like had spoken at the end of that game. But yeah, I don't know what the hell this is or what it could be. I would hope it's the Arbiter, but my guess is it's the Spirit of Fire.
Okay.
If Atriox is here, then that means he's not on the Ark. So that means they've had probably a good chance to get a foothold on the Ark and maybe like travel. I just don't know how they would end up at Zeta Halo. It doesn't exactly make a ton of sense.
Yeah, I mean, same kind of line of thinking. It's exciting. I want to know what the hell it is too. I mean, obviously to me the curiosity is the decision is to remove it. Right. So why wasn't this there? What was the thought process of the studio that they couldn't put this in the initial game? And is it just because they didn't have time and now they're going to tell future stories based on what we currently have now? Right. So I would love it for it to be the Arbiter. I think that would be a great transition, as a friendly to see what's been going on. We get the interaction. I'm still, even though I didn't like Halo 5, I'm still kind of like, where the hell is really Locke? Like, we got to reference, like, what's going on. We saw the toy leak and, one of the brothers had the helmet on the thing. So I'm like, is he dead? Is he not? But then we get the audio file that I guess he's around. So, I do want a proper conclusion to that. Like, what really happened? Even if he doesn't have Spartan armor anymore. Well, what's going on?
In one of the toys, it says Agent Locke as he appears in Halo Infinite.
Right.
So he was probably supposed to be there, and then he's probably in the third act that got cut. I wouldn't be surprised if the third act was supposed to be this big, like, Avengers style thing where, like, maybe a bunch of people show up and maybe the Spirit of Fire shows up and the Arbiter shows. I wouldn't be surprised if that was like the original idea, but we don't have that. Instead, we have a toy of Locke. And he looks awesome, by the way.
Yeah.
Like, that armor, I always hated his armor. So like he looks so much cooler as like this like kind of scavenging like Marine type and just like BDUs with like a tank top. And he's like, that's an awesome look for. I would have loved to see him in the campaign like that.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Locke is a terrible character. I just think they just didn't give him anything to do.
Yeah, and they just to me sold the game wrong. They advertised the game wrong. It's as if it's this, we're gonna get this epic matchup, and it was like solved in like 5 minutes, and then it's like, okay, we're friends now, and we're gonna rock out, and that's it. Yeah. So I really want a proper conclusion to continuation of his arc, and to see what's going on. So I'm whatever goes on, I'm with it. I like the fact that this is being introduced, and I want to know when it actually is going to happen. That's just where I'm at with it.
How about the Endless, gentlemen? Are we excited about the future with that and all it presents? We saw the Silex is built up. It's being marketed as a more terrifying than the Flood villain, which is, by the way, I just want to say, you want to talk about writing yourself into a corner. That's really tough to top, because I always think of, and I get it, like, I'm a little biased here. I love Combat Evolve. I think at 343 Guilty Spark, the level the blood spread across the entire level. It's covering the elevator. You're like, it goes from this science fiction war, humanity versus aliens, to like kind of horror. And you're telling me in this world that, as Chris so aptly said, can barely go dark, that we're going to have something more terrifying than the Flood. I just, tough to top.
That's a crazy corner to write yourself in, because like, I can't think of many things more terrifying, even just conceptually.
Yeah, exactly.
than the Flood. It's a genuinely horrific thing to imagine existing. And if the Harbinger is an Endless, which is kind of the prevailing theory, because she was like taken out of a Silex. You see her Silex in the beginning in Not in the beginning. In the first, I think in the level where it's still linear, but it opens up into that big area where like you clear off the landing zone and then the pilot takes you off. Just before that, you see an open Silex, and Cortana says, "Oh, what's that?" And he's like, and Chief is like, "Nothing good." And that's very clearly the Harbinger. Is she an Endless? Because if so,
that's the theory.
It wasn't really hard to kill her.
Right.
Didn't seem super terrifying. It just seemed like an anime person, like just like teleporting all over the place. Yeah, doing like Naruto moves. I don't know. Like, is this scary?
Yeah.
Where's the didact, by the way? Like, it's all this is very, very weird, and I'm curious as to see how they're going to justify this because I don't see the Endless as even remotely. I think the elites are scarier, than the Endless. You know, like even just hunter worms, are more of a terrifying concept. You know, so I don't know where they could possibly go with this, especially if they're all going to talk in cryptic soliloquies. I am the harbinger of the truth. You are not the future. It's like, oh, you suck. You suck. You're such a terribly written. I don't know. Like that was like the one part of the game where I was like, you are a terrible character, and I'm glad that you've been dealt with. You know?
Yeah, we gotta see. They got themselves in the corner with that one. Yeah, I mean, the flood is epic. You know, they're just it's like you said. I remember that first introduction and just the pure overwhelming nature and having the shotgun and you're like, get off of me. And then, you know, even fighting them again in Halo Wars 2 and having to deal with, you know, the Banished and stuff. So yeah, we're gonna see. We're gonna see if it's as threatening as it is. But clearly, listen, the way I get the vibe I got, this is 10-year plan stuff. This is, you know, she got off the signal, she's dead, they're coming, kind of thing. But I really do hope there's more stories to tell. There's so much they haven't touched yet, you know, and that's what I'm hoping. That's the exciting part of this open world, quote unquote, live service aspect of Halo, is that we won't have to hopefully wait another, 6 years so that we can get these stories to fill in these gaps, because there's a ton of great lore here. We want to know what's going on with all these different groups, and that's where I'm at with it. So
yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing certain characters, specifically ones that have been already confirmed, basically, like offensive bias. Like that's going to be, that's a crazy thing, because in the lore, that's a big deal. Because I think in the early parts of like the Forerunner Flood War, they built an AI to combat the Flood, and his name was Mendicant Bias, and he was taken by the Flood and converted against the Forerunners, and he fucked them up. Mm-hmm. And then the Forerunners made offensive bias to counter it, in the same way that the UNSC made the weapon to counter Cortana. It's a very mirror story. So the idea, and offensive bias won, and Mendicant Bias was buried on the Ark, and we've never heard from him since. And the fact that this is the first time since, like, in 10 plus years, that offensive bias has been brought up at all is very, very exciting, because it's a character with a rich history. Yes. And very if he comes into play, that means Mendicant Bias will come into play. And he's like probably like one of my favorite characters in the entirety of the series. And he's never been explored really in a game. He's always in the background of the original trilogy. He's like whispering to you on High Charity, and you can hear him if you play the soundtrack in reverse. And like he's fighting against you in Halo 2, and he's like, Cortana's like, there's something fighting back from the Covenant key ship, and it's too smart to be a Covenant AI. It's like, what is that? Oh, it's Mendicant Bias. And then he gets reunited on the Ark. He's the AI that keeps the last level of Halo 3 from falling apart. So you can get to the ship. He's the person that collapses the portal, so you can be sent to Requiem.
Mm-hmm. Who do we think is? I'm sorry not to cut you, but who do we think is helping? Because when Weapons says in Infinite, I feel like someone's helping us. Like, who do we feel is this?
That's offensive bias for sure, man.
That is
like a portal opens up out of nowhere.
Yes,
it's a Forerunner portal that opens up, and he's like, "Where's this coming from? Like, where's it taking us?" It's like, I don't know. And then you jump, and it's like 3 days in the future, and you're on the other side of the ring in a desert where presumably the Endless are buried. There's no that's offensive bias, and to have a game promise that we might be able to interact with this character is super exciting to me, because it's something I've been waiting for since I thought this was going to happen immediately after Halo 3.
Yeah.
Because they seem to be setting that up, and then they just never did anything with it. And I was so upset.
Yeah.
Instead, we got this like
it really kind of tackles the idea, Chris, that you and I talked about for a while, which is like Halo Infinite in so many ways feels like the true sequel to 3 that we had all kind of waited for.
Yeah. They
Another reason why.
man,
I didn't know any of that, to tell you the truth.
No, because it's buried. It's like it's very buried deep. Like you talk to many can buy us on those terminals in Halo 3 if you bothered to read through them, but like not a lot of people did. And who's gonna play the soundtrack in reverse?
Yeah.
You know, like it's all these like really cool, like subtle ways that they introduce this character throughout all of the most important events of the original trilogy, and just to have that relationship possibly explored in a game is like very exciting, and it does feel like a proper sequel, and it feels like they're actually mining the wealth of material they have instead of just being like, hey, here's Sarah Palmer. Hey, here's Lasky.
Yeah.
Here's a bunch of people that we made up, even though we have all of this stuff to work with, you know?
Right.
And to be fair, I'm glad they waited this long, because whenever they chose to dive back into some of Bungie's stuff, they always mess it up in some way. Like, oh, hey, here's the didact and he sucks. Oh, hey, oh, did you like Halo 3 ODST? Well, guess what? Mickey's a traitor.
Yeah.
And the rookie is dead.
Yeah.
Fuck you. By the way, there's an implication that June is dead in this game. That was not. That's a little weird. Hopefully that's not
where
true.
Was that? Was that like
that
audio
was
luck?
So that was when Cortana's talking to an AI called Leonidas, who is in charge of Laconia Station or something, and she commands him to like blow up the station, and the station explodes. That's where June is stationed, and where a bunch of the Spartans are. Where I think he said like 50 Spartans are dead on that station or whatever. And it's like, that's I hope you didn't do that, because that sucks.
Why? The real question is like, from my angle, why?
Yeah, it's a very weird.
Why just kill them off?
Yeah, for no reason. And why destroy Australia?
Yeah, for no reason.
Halo 4 hates Arizona. Halo Infinite hates Australia, because those are they're just singled out and destroyed. The brute homeworld. Fuck the brute homeworld.
Oh yeah,
demolished.
Yeah.
But Australia in particular.
Yeah,
that's where she draws the line for Earth. Very weird.
Hilarious.
Last lingering topic I personally wanted to tackle before we just talk about the future of Halo Infinite and wrap things up. The game length. I know this is less spoilery, but I just wanted to get a gauge how long it took you guys to beat, because for me, to my surprise, the campaign was done in like 10 hours. And obviously, I think this was planned to be much longer. I think just because it's an open world game, you could safely expect a little bit longer compared to typical Halo campaigns. But again, I went through all the Halo games beforehand, and all of them I beat within a day or two. And with Infinite, I remember I got my review code, I sat down, and I beat it within 2 days. And I was like, wow, that was way shorter than I expected. And it kind of gave it the feeling that I saw in the Patreon comments. I feel like we've sort of expressed it as like, as it's ending, it feels like it's truly beginning. It reminds me of, I'm going to make an obscure reference here that maybe 5 people will get, but it reminds me of how I feel about the Trails of series, where the first entry in every, like Trails in the Sky, Trails of Cold Steel, all lore bombs, like all world building, all character development. So then the sequel, it's like, we don't got to do any of that. You know everything, like go, go, go. And so every time those games end, it feels like it's really just beginning. I kind of got that vibe here with Halo Infinite after about 10 hours. I want to know with you two, how long it took you, and if you felt a similar emotion. Chris, I know you were bigger on the ending because of the lore implication stuff, so I want to dish it to you first real quick.
Yeah, I don't know if I know exactly how long it took me, but I know it didn't take me much longer than previous Halo campaigns, and I think I was happy about that, honestly, especially given the variety that we had. Like we had Forerunner hallway after Forerunner hallway, grassy field with trees after grassy field with trees, and if there was more level variety, then I would have been a little bit more disappointed at the game length, I think, because I would have been like, oh man, I want this to go on for much longer. But I think the fact that I felt like it was kind of dragging in certain places because of the visual lack of variety, I when it ended and I felt like, okay, we dispatched of Escharum. Escherum's dead. This isn't exactly a cliffhanger in the same way that Halo 2 was, where you just have all these characters that just continue on and you're just wondering what the hell's going on. We got the Harbinger, we figured out what happened to Cortana, we dealt with Escharum. I felt like it was a lot more complete than I expected given the tumultuous dev cycle and all that. But I did feel like it was a little bit shorter than I expected it to be, but I also expected it to be a lot more diverse. And I expected it to have a lot more linear levels with a lot more set pieces. So I think it's the appropriate length for a game that offers what it does, if that makes sense. Like, I think of like The Last of Us 2 as like an example of like a game that is just way longer than it needs to be, because everything the game has to show you is kind of showed you by the halfway point. So you have like another 50% of the game to go without being shown any new mechanics or being shown anything new. Whereas this one, it felt like it was just as long as I think it needed to be, despite the fact that I wish it had more and bigger levels and more linear missions to go through and continue on with some of the story things that they left open for whatever the hell expansions they're going to make in the future. I wasn't bothered by it necessarily. It wasn't like a huge sticking point.
Cog, what about you, man?
Yeah, I think it was just right for me. Coming into it, I was probably the person that was dissenting, like, oh, open world. I just open world fatigued out, so I didn't know how they were going to approach it, and I just thought it was the right. Shout out to the cops go by. I thought it was the right length going by, because it was just like, okay, once I got to that inside levels and just doing what I needed to do. And then it kind of just ramped up where we started to get the information from the Silent Auditorium, and we started to get the information from Harbinger and then Escharum. I felt okay. I'm getting to where I need to go. So when it ended, it's kind of like what you said, man, where it's like the real story is about to happen now, right? The real what we got to. They want to tie up these loose ends as best as they possibly can. And I thought it was okay. I thought it was just enough for me where I didn't start to get annoyed, and I'm like, okay, when is this thing gonna be over? Like, because there are games like that when I get to a point and I'm like, all right, you're just artificially extending my time here for the illusion of all this great gameplay you're supposed to give me, and I want to get to the meat and potatoes of it. The only issues that we talked about was just the execution of open world linear. That could have been better, of course, but length, I was okay. I was okay. I was like, this is what I'm totally cool. Not everything has to be the 100 hours. Oh my God, I gotta be immersed into like that. To me, it gets annoying, and I'm cool with this length. I'm actually okay with it. So
that was my fear, man. My fear was like open world Halo. It's like, oh my God, it's gonna be 50 hours of Far Cry nonsense.
Yep.
And then like the few things that are in this game that are like Far Cry, like the forward operating bases, feel a lot more fun because the sandbox is so much better.
Right.
So like I didn't even mind it. I always think of, when I think of games, especially FPSs, where I finish the game and I'm like, that's it. I think of vanilla Destiny 1.
Oh,
where, like,
God. Yeah.
Where like you spend like 20 hours and then you get to this point where like, we defeated a blob. And you're just like, what the hell did we accomplish? Like, who was the bad guy? Who's the good? Who is a character? What is going on? And I don't know. Like, I played this game, and there's something to be said about game length. There's definitely something to be said about the fact that it does feel like the story just kind of gets started when it ends, but not in like a Halo 5 way. Halo 5 had that same feeling where like, ooh, it felt like the story was going to begin now. but it also felt like nothing got resolved at the end of Halo 5. Whereas this one, I felt like enough got resolved where I felt like, yeah, okay, this is a fair ending. Like, I understand. Like, there's all the main bad guys are gone. The Silent Shadow and these Spartan killers are dealt with. Makes sense that this would be the end. And it didn't just sneak up on you like in Halo 2, where you're playing an Arbiter mission and then suddenly that's it. You know? But yeah.
All right.
That boss fight though with Jaga, man.
Yeah, I love the Jaga boss fight, and I thought he was criminally underutilized. Like, he served his purpose, but man, I would have loved to see more of this dude. Like, I thought, obviously, part of it was my own expectations. I'm like, maybe he'll like stalk you around the map. Then you find
that's what I thought too. Yeah,
he's just kind of like a cutscene, and you're like, oh, now he's being deployed, like the Spartan killer. And I feel like he lived up to it. Like, he killed me the most in the whole game. Like, he was kicking my ass in that boss fight, and I loved how it was foggy inside, and you're like, yo, you had to actually use audio, and you're like,
I love the audio
on my left, and like I threw down, like I forgot what I threw down to like stop him in his tracks though, and it was such a good boss fight. I thought it was definitely my favorite in the game.
I love the going into the room to find Echo's what is it? The thing that they showed us.
It's like a little hologram thing.
This hologram thing, and the recording with the kids and stuff. And I don't know. I just thought it was cool. Like, I got your man. He's locked up. You know, you're looking for this thing. And again, the game, I have to emphasize, it's criminally underrated boss and enemy banter while fighting. Like, it's just good, man. And he's talking that talk like they want the thrill of defeating Master Chief. I just like, even when they beat you, sometimes I smile like, wow, like this is hardly a challenge. Or like I just love that stuff.
It is cool. Like, that was like a really great boss. And I found myself honestly using a lot more of the equipment than I thought I would throughout the whole game. Like, I remember thinking, there's no way, like, what, I'm gonna use a drop shield in the campaign? No, I'm gonna use my grappling hook and that's it. But I use my threat sensor and drop wall a lot. Honestly, I use the thrusters the least.
Yes, yes, same.
Because the grappling hook is just a better thruster anyway.
Yes.
But yeah, that was a cool boss fight, and I just wanted to make sure I touched on it because that was just really cool.
Jaga.
I agree. All right. Last question of the episode goes to Gabriel Garland to wrap us up. Happy New Year. Based on 343 and Xbox referring to Infinite as a platform, I would imagine that the story is going to continue in some form within this title. How would you like this to be done? I think it'll either be a single-player campaign expansion or something akin to Halo 4's Spartan Ops multiplayer missions. Personally, I want to see more PvE elements added to the game. A non-pay-to-win version of Warzone sounds fabulous. All the best, Gabe. So I feel like with the trademark, there's kind of a dead giveaway on where they're going next. Do you think this is the definitive plan moving forward? Like, annual campaign expansions, every holiday we get a new chapter in the Halo story? Because that's kind of what I'm going for. That's what I think they're going to do.
I think that's the safest bet. Yeah. It seems to me like that's where they're going, which is exciting.
Yes.
I'm really looking forward to that. Hope to God they stay away from Spartan Ops. Look, I know some people enjoyed that somehow, but it was just terrible. I don't know, man. Maybe you guys remember it differently, but I remember just playing through Spartan Ops and just being baffled at how boring and just how uninteresting it was, and just these characters that I was like, who are you? Why are we doing this? I already don't like these Spartan 4s. You know, so like I gotta spend, and then you just like, oh hey, here's we threw a bunch of AI on Valhalla, and that's a level. It's like, no, it's not. If that's what we have to look forward to, God. But I don't think that's what we have to look forward to. I think fortunately we're going to have proper cutscenes. I think we're going to have, you know, actual story expansions. And what I would love to be the natural progression is, as they add, you know, maybe they can tie story beats into features that are launched into the game, like we talked about with the mid-credit sequence, possibly introducing co-op. Well, I don't think that's what they're doing with that cutscene. I think that would be cool to have something like that. Like, my ideal dream would be like, hey, we know you want playable elites, but you know what? Here's an Arbiter campaign to justify why you would have that. You know, because I know a lot of people want playable elites back. They've been a staple since Halo 2, and they were absent from all of 343's outings. And that would be a great way to get that feature implemented. It's like, hey, here's what the Arbiter's doing. And maybe it takes place not even on the ring. Maybe it's on Sang Helios and he's doing his own thing. And maybe they don't, maybe it has nothing to do with this.
Yeah.
But that's what's kind of exciting about this as a platform is I feel like they can utilize this game in a lot more unique of a fashion than they would be able to with like a traditional game with traditional story chapters, where I feel like they have leeway now where, yeah, they could continue the story and that would be really cool. But maybe we see what Buck is doing. You know, maybe we play as different other characters. Like I would be totally stoked to see something like that. But I do think it's a safe bet that maybe once a year, come fall, you'll have some kind of story thing to look forward to. And I think, honestly, what we're going to be seeing this year, if anything, if they announce anything, I think the next thing we're going to see, whatever Halo the Endless is, I think it's going to be the third act of the game. I think it's going to be what they planned to do and didn't have time to iron out and finish. And I think that's what we're going to be getting. And then after that is what I'm really curious about.
Yeah.
To see like how they expand it.
Yeah, literally, that used upon the possibilities are infinite. I love it, man. I love it. This is
playable grunts.
Bro, I'm here for this. This is the part of the transition to live service or, you know, open world kind of stuff that excited me, because again, if you're a fan of this franchise, there's nothing that just hurts more when it's like, all right, guys, tune in next game, you know, 6 year and 6. And it's like, no, you don't leave me here like this. I need more. You know what I'm saying? So this is what I'm talking about. And like you said, Chris, I want those other side stories fleshed out. I want to know what's going on with these guys. It doesn't even have to be every single year a continuation of what Chief is doing, right?
Right.
There's so many things to tell. So it's like, this is exciting. And we know ultimately we will get more Chief at some point. But I just love the idea. You know what I think about, man? I think about Gears 5 Hive Busters.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and you got these little self-contained stories. You got this girl's daughter, and you know, you got stuff going on. And then it's another thing, let's be honest, for them to improve on the platform from a technical level. And because that was my issue that I have to touch on that I forgot to mention, which was that, you know, as you start to get more in the open world, I think is when I first got the Banshee and I started to see the pop-in energy going on. And I don't know, the what to start the show. And for me personally, I did have some technical issues with some of the cutscenes. They were a little framey sometimes. They weren't as smooth. So to me, I like the idea, because again, we're both Destiny guys. I like the idea of the platform also improving graphically and technically while you're telling stories. So now you have more time. Multiplayer. We know about the co-op. I think that's a great idea, because if they would do something cool like that with the Arbiter and introduce, like, yo, here's a little cinema, introduce it now, you know, narratively while you're getting it, and then boom, now you service that base. That's like, okay, this is why it was cut. They got a lot of potential here. Now, according to Staten, these guys are super excited, like, about what they have to tell and show us. So I think he spoke to Ryan about it. Like, they're pumped about it. The vibe I got was, like we always said, Matty, this thing was coming in hot. Get it out the door. We cut damn near 2/3 of the game. We made a lot of concessions, but the issue, I think the mantra was make sure the core sandbox gameplay is fun, and we executed that. And they did do that. They did a good job.
Yeah. Now
fill it out and become the Halo that we want it to be with this endless potential. And I'm pumped for it. That to be excited potentially, if they have a cadence of every year, you got me, man. You got me. I'm in.
It's exciting because that's what kind of impressed me about the live service model that they kind of went with here. Because my main concern was Destiny's a live service model, and that was like a rough go. That story was not nearly as complete as Halo Infinite is, even with 2/3 of it cut.
Preach.
The multiplayer was not in nearly as good of a state. So in my opinion, like, it just really has nowhere to go but up from here.
Right.
especially considering, Halo 5 wasn't a live service game. We just were stuck with that.
Yeah.
That was just what it was. And for a lot of us, if you haven't liked a Halo game for a long time, this is probably the first one. This is probably the first one in a long time that you're vibing with.
Yes.
In possibly over 10 years.
Yeah.
It's very possible. A lot of people fell off with Reach,
Yeah.
And 4 and 5 didn't help. So, it's nice to know that even though there are things in this game, even from a single player perspective, that aren't necessarily the best. And like the graphical, I noticed that stuff too when I was in the Wasp and the trees would come in over the distance. I was like, man, that sucks. But I look at Destiny 2 now compared to what it used to be. And Destiny 2 looks way better than it used to. And I'm like, how'd you do that? Because that doesn't really happen. You don't see that kind of thing. The only time I've ever seen that is Metro Exodus, when they did that ray tracing next gen upgrade, or whenever they do this weird hey, here's Skyrim Anniversary, you can fish. It's not a common thing that you see a game like Destiny do that, and the fact that Halo can do that now, and the cross generational support thing kind of that's the one thing where
you got to keep dragging them along.
You got to drag. I
wonder on Xbox One.
I wonder at what point they're going to just cut the Xbox One and PS4 off, because I feel like they're going to have to at some point. But I'm looking forward to the potential of what we have to look forward to, especially because I've been led to believe through cryptic tweets that Joe Staten is writing.
He's here. Stuff. He's here, baby. Yeah, he's not. Ryan asked him straight up, was this a one-time thing where you were brought in to help and then you're going to leave? And he's like, no. They gave this man a position. He is here, and that excites me.
Yeah. No, I know he has a position, but I've been led to believe that he's writing some of this DLC, which, if that's true, that's as good as you can get, man. Yes. You're not going to get a better outcome than that for any game series in the world, dude.
He's a beast.
You don't have the original writers of Resident Evil. You don't have the original writers of half of these franchises that have been around for as long as Halo has been. And the fact that you nailed that you got that guy back, that does not happen every day. And you're going to want to make as much use of that as possible.
Yep.
I'm just really optimistic about it.
As am I. I'm very excited for the future of this series. That was the main takeaway for me. Once I finished it up, I was like, I had some qualms here and there, but I'm excited about Halo again. And at first I thought maybe it was just the infectious pre-release hype that was getting a lot of people. But after finishing it, it's Halo's back, and that's exciting because I don't mean to bring it up for the fourth time, but just playing through all of them and reconnecting with them, remembering why they were so special to me, especially the first Halo, and then playing Infinite and kind of getting those same feelings again. It was okay, I remember as a kid growing up, I really hadn't connected with Halo since I was in 8th grade. So I was 13. I'm 26 now. So half my life ago, right? I've not really connected with Halo. And to just be back and feeling hey, here it is again. It's good to be playing Halo. It's good to be looking forward to Halo. That's probably the biggest mission accomplished of anything they did with the lore, the gameplay. It's that they won people like me back, and I care about Halo again. So that's what excites me moving forward is I can actually look forward to this stuff now.
Yes, sir.
So with that, gents, is there anything left on the table that we'd like to discuss when it comes to Halo Infinite? Chris, of course, I want to make sure you've crossed your T's, dotted all your I's here. I know you had a ton to say. So do you feel like you've spoken on everything before we conclude?
Yeah, I think I've spoken on mostly everything. There's only one minor thing.
Let's go.
Very disappointed that you couldn't pick up the skulls.
Yeah, that was weird.
Because I remember in the old Halo games picking up the skulls and bashing grunts over the head with it, and I was like, oh, that's fun. But in this game, you just sort of find them and you pick them up like you pick up audio logs. So you go up to them, you interact with them, and then they kind of go away, and then you've collected them. But it doesn't have that same. It's all the more confusing because there's already a skull in the game, but you pick up. It's the oddball. So why not? It's just very weird. There's a whole animation set up for it. There's a whole combat model set up for holding the skull. Right. Why is that? it just seems like a weird thing to remove.
Right.
Like I just don't understand the thought process of that. And I don't know, just hopefully we get some new weapons and vehicles that can be thrown into the campaign as well. Like I know I would love to fly a Falcon with Marines with arcane sentinel beams in the air. That's one thing that I would hope for. But aside from that,
terrorize the fobs.
yeah, dude, it'd be fun. I'm working on a legendary playthrough right now, and it's kicking my ass.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm with you guys. Like, I'm super pumped, super excited. You know, I can't wait to see where it goes. You know, I think when they introduced campaign, I purposely saved legendary, not doing legendary for when co-op drops.
Same.
Because I want that feel, the hardest. Like that's a tradition for me. When every Halo comes out, crank that bad boy on legendary, grab the homie up, let's do it. You know, let's rock out all night. So I'm excited for that part. If they give us a little, little cooperative, little scene, introduce it, I wouldn't be mad if they decide to do that. Some type of narrative connection as to why it exists. I'm cool. But listen, this is 343's best Halo. They finally got the core aspects. I felt satisfied. I didn't feel disgusted at the end of it. Again, kudos to the entire team, Joseph State and those guys. The fact, like you said, Chris, they brought him back. He's going to be around for the long haul. The stories that could be told. And I got to give credit to Bonnie Ross and the team, too, because another reason why is because it's one thing to be going through developmental hell and turmoil, but it's another thing to have that admission to say, you know what? We could use him. And to put the egos aside and bring someone in that has that connection. And it ended up working out because if you think about it, could you imagine if this thing would have launched when the Series X in the state it was?
Dude, like it's incomprehensible. Like I really can't even imagine what would have
and Cyberpunk
launched.
in the same. Oh my God, man,
that would have been a rough time.
And to think about the political cachet Staten has to be able to influence that type of decision where we know Microsoft brass wants that game to launch. It was literally on the back of the Series X box, Halo Infinite. They had every intention to cash in. And we talked about the parallels with Halo 2. This was kind of similar, where it's like, bro, we're not ready. We need time. And kudos to them. They pulled it off. This could have been the biggest L. They avoided that. And then they ended up being successful and having a solid campaign where now we're like, yo, the future's bright. We got more to talk about, right? So I'm excited.
That would have been the end of it, man. Like after the collection launching in the state that it did, after 5 being just generally not well received, if that game had launched in 2020, like the 343 might not even be here today.
Be here. Facts.
Good call on them. Good call on Microsoft brass for listening to Staten, because we know based on some history that they don't always care about releasing a broken game. As you know, it's not all that uncommon. So
shout out to Crackdown.
Good for them. I'm glad that.
Shout out to Crackdown 3. We're outside.
Oh man. Ooh.
Yeah.
But yeah,
they did it.
I think I've said as much as I could possibly say about it.
Good.
Matty?
No, I'm good, man. Then my closing piece is really just being excited about Halo. So I've said all I've had to say. It seems like we've all cleaned up everything we wanted to tackle in this episode, and we hope the audience enjoyed a return episode here in 2022. Chris, thank you for lending us your time and knowledge here on Halo. And of course, we'll be gathering again, as more things roll out.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
It's a staple. A lot of people just assume now whenever we put Halo in the title, I was like, oh, Chris will be there. Like that.
A few times if you can't make it, I'm like, damn.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will always free time for this. This is my only outlet to talk about this, because I used to I thought about maybe I should do videos about it, but then I was like, I don't want to be a Halo channel. Yeah. So this is my outlet for it.
I feel you.
We love it.
We got you. We got you. We support you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in to episode 489 of DDU. Other than that, that's all we've got to say here. So we'll catch you all in next week's DDU, next week's DD, all that good stuff. So until then, take great care of yourselves. Happy New Year. And we'll talk then, all right? Peace out.
Peace.
Take care, guys.
Defining Duke, an Xbox podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Colin's Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from the United States of America. The show is conceived by Matthew Mr. Matty Plays Schroeder and me, Colin Moriarty, and is written and produced by Matthew Schroeder. Matty's co-host is Barry Lord Cognito Eversley. Defining Duke's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. All of Last Stand's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including Defining Duke, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level on Patreon, and we're thankful for your kindness and generosity.